Hello, hello! Hi. Hello, everyone! Welcome back to LoFi History for February 2022. We've missed you.
We've missed you.
Yeah, but boy, have we been busy.
We've been so busy.
Yeah, we had 3 webcasts today. 4. We had 4 webcasts today.
And there's 3 or 4 tomorrow scheduled.
3 or 4 tomorrow.
Yep.
So we have been doing a lot of time traveling since we last met over LoFi History. If you're not familiar, what do we mean by time traveling? Well, if you are a teacher in Georgia, then you get a free webcast and get to time travel and meet a historic character live over our Zoom time machine.
That's right.
And today, and like we were saying, tomorrow, we've got lots booked. We're so excited that teachers are taking advantage of this. We've even had people out of state interested recently, so that's been very cool as well. But Glenn, I see that you stuck with your time traveling outfit for today because you were a time traveling historian in World War II.
Right, a World War II soldier. And the beauty of it is, I'm a World War II man, or because they use so much old surplus stuff in the Korean War, I could also be Korean War man.
Ah, okay.
Or I could be 1980s Rambo and super surplus stuff wandering the streets of some strange northwestern town, ready to wreak havoc on a small town that decides to treat me wrong.
Well, I hope not. I hope not.
We'll see. What do you think of that, Brian Dennehy?
Yeah. And then Marie, you were busy today with our homeschool connection, learning all about what an absolute monarch is.
And a constitutional monarchy.
Ooh, and a constitutional monarchy. Yes. So we have been super busy here at the Cottrell Digital Studio. But today is all about answering your history questions. Our historians, Glenn and Marie, are here to answer your questions.
I've just
realized. You realize how not cool you are right now?
Our costumes are incomplete.
Your costumes are incomplete. Where?
Oh, both of us forgot our sunglasses.
You forgot your cool sunglasses. I don't know.
I was seriously sitting here like, this looks. What has she done with the room different? It's like, oh.
You know what? Let's just cancel.
We
can't answer history questions without looking really cool. So
because we both forgot.
Okay, maybe we'll just try it and see how it goes. I see Terry is here. Hello, Terry from Iowa.
Hey, Terry.
Now you know what our eyes look like.
Yes, right, exactly. Also see we've got Josh on YouTube. Welcome back.
Josh.
So, and Karen is here. Yes, Karen says no sunglasses. I know. Karen knew this before we did.
2 eye patches each.
Yeah, that's the coolest.
That's the coolest ever.
Well, tell us a little bit more about what you are wearing. Let's go back to Glenn. So, Glenn, you were telling us that this is World War II, but it could also be Korean War. But there's a lot of functionality in this getup. How is it different from World War I?
So I'm so glad you asked, Libba. We only have an hour, so I will not take up more than 40 minutes.
Yeah.
World War I uniforms were still in that era where they're trying to make them look snazzy and professional. The field uniform was the same as the dress uniform. It's the same garment, right? Not very practical. The World War I had the high wool collar, fancy buttons. It was even like fitted a little bit. Getting into World War II, initially they had a jacket that was based on a sport, not a coat and tie sports coat, but literally like an outdoor windbreaker. And about 2 years into the war, they began to realize, you know what, this uniform is actually incredibly impractical. We need to design real functional, built for the field uniforms. And so they came up with this longer coat with gigantic pockets that entire ration packs can fit in. It's cotton poplin. It's windproof. It's waterproof. And it is, in effect, the basis of BDUs and DCUs that they're still wearing today, right? Yeah, there's.
Yeah, we can show you. This is a still from the actual webcast that happened this morning, so you can see Glenn's full getup. Do you want to tell us any more about what we can see on the screen now?
Oh, a little. Yeah, I've got the classic helmet. This is a late war GI, right? This has the older style. The later war style uniform, you've got the green web gear and equipment instead of the early khaki web gear. They have ditched the backpack that was a World War I holdover. They've just got stuff in a bag. So it is just way more practical, functional. It's loose. It's not form-fitting. And it's built on the concept of layering. So you can put this coat on over a t-shirt or a wool shirt or wool accessories to keep you warm. And this is a technically, they call it a Jeep cap. This is what everyone thinks of when they think of MASH, right? Radar O'Reilly wore one of these, but it's a World War II holdover because they made so much stuff for World War II, they didn't need to make new stuff for the Korean War until they did.
Yeah.
But that is a story for another
Yes.
program.
Very cool, very cool. All right, Marie, let's go into your costume. What are you wearing today?
So I am, in honor of it being February and my month of my wedding,
Oh, yeah,
I am
that's
wearing
right.
my engagement dress. So I made a 1880s style engagement dress. Well, I didn't get engaged in this dress, but for engagement photos,
Yeah.
because Stephen and I enjoy historical reenactment, we decided to do a historical engagement photo shoot.
Aw.
So I am wearing my 1880s engagement dress that I did all of the embroidery on, and actually it's a bustle dress, so I'm going to stand up.
Yeah, go
Because
for
that's
it.
like the fun part that no one gets to
I'll get out of the way just for a second. There we go. Yeah, so I see the bustle in the back.
Yes.
Nice.
And then also the Gilded Age, which is Julian Fellowes' new TV show
Yes.
that just premiered, which is set in the 1880s. So I thought that this would be fun pop culture
Oh,
reference
nice.
as well.
Very cool. Now, as a historian, would you recommend The Gilded Age?
I
Is
have
it pretty
not
good?
seen
oh,
it yet.
okay. So
no,
coming out. Yeah.
it just came out the last week, and I've been so busy that I have
Yeah.
not been able to watch it. But
Oh, yeah. Right,
I
yeah.
wouldn't.
Yeah. Oh, why is that?
I haven't
Glenn?
seen it, but the Gilded Age is, as we all know, America's most boring time period.
Is it really?
There are different views on the subject.
But think about all of the interpersonal conflict that could go on within New York society within the Gilded Age.
Ooh, okay, I see.
I think it would be fun.
I see.
I'm excited.
Well, we
It's
do
just gonna
have.
be very pretty.
Oh, it will be very pretty. There's
It'll
no
just
question
pretty to
about
look
that.
at.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Now we do have some questions and some comments. I also see that Gabby is going to be so disappointed that you don't have your sunglasses. No, I'm sure she'll
We've
forgive
let
us this
everyone
time.
down. I
We-
guarantee our viewership is going to plummet
I think
next
so.
time.
I think this is the end, you guys.
We'll have to wear a bunch of sunglasses next time. to make
Okay,
up
we'll
for
make
it.
up for it next time by wearing multiple sunglasses.
Yes.
All right, we got it. Don't worry, Gabby. Alma, Gabby, good to see both of you. And so we're going to get started with Josh's question. So Josh's question is, oh, and by the way, if you are just joining us, then do feel free to go ahead and chat your questions. We will get them in the queue of questions. And it can really be about just about anything. Both Glenn and Marie have a pretty wide breadth of knowledge. And if we don't know it, we'll Google it for you. So no worries. Okay, so Josh is going to start us off with, what if Samuel Tilden was elected president in 1876? Oh, and of course, we have our classic Josh what if, of course. Would Union troops have remained in the South? Would African Americans have their freedom to use their rights sooner? Okay, now, I think this might require some context, and Joshua even so kindly provided that context.
Oh, good.
By saying when Hayes was elected president, his deal with the Democrats was if they voted for him, he would remove the troops in the South, right?
So this was post Grant, right? Grant had served both of his terms as president, Reconstruction president, and then there was it went, as so many of these controversial elections do, they go to the House of Representatives. And in the House of Representatives, they begin to wrangle, just like the election of 1800. And, well, you know. So, Rutherford B. Hayes, Republican, Northerner, and Tilden, a Democrat. Well, yeah, anyway, here's the deal.
A Democrat of that time.
A Democrat
is
of
what-
that time, yeah. It's complicated.
Always complicated.
Glenn's second rule of history: everything is complicated. So the Rutherford B. Hayes, basically, they came up with a bargain. And think about it. I want you to think about this. This is how the President of the United States was elected to office, right? There's no insurrection. There's no. It is literally a backroom bargain between political parties where they say, I tell you what, we will swing enough votes, Rutherford B. Hayes, to elect you president if you promise, the Southerners are saying this, if you promise to end Reconstruction and remove federal troops from their occupation of the South that have been there since the end of the Civil War. So what is that, 12 years? The Northern troops have been there. And Rutherford B. Hayes in this backroom deal says, okay,
Sure.
because I want to be president. And that's how it goes down. Rutherford B. Hayes is confirmed as president of the United States. Tilden is not. It became fairly common knowledge that this is how it had gone down, which gave after Grant's terms as president, his presidency was full of controversy and scandals and things like that. So here comes Hayes, and there had just been a financial, not a depression, but a financial panic because of the money supply. It's right. We're moving right. This is the beginnings of the Gilded Age.
Yeah.
But there are financial issues. The North fought the Civil War, won the Civil War at great cost of blood and treasure. They've been sending still their sons and brothers and fathers to the South to occupy it. And by this point, the Redeemers in the South, the Southern Democrats who are trying to get the South's old power structure back in place, they've more or less accomplished it, right? And so this is the final straw, and people in the North are like, you know what? We're done. We have this, I mean, it's a little bit like the American involvement in Afghanistan and Iraq. We've had troops there for so long. We're trying to keep the order. It's not working, so let's just get out and let's be done with it. Our economy is tanking. We need to focus on that. We've already sacrificed enough for these Southern people to try to make things work, and it's not working. We're done. That is what actually happened. So to Josh's question,
Our big
what if somehow the election had gone differently and Tilden had been put into office? I tell you what, you may have a different opinion. I don't think it would have been that different. I think the troops might have been there a little bit longer, but like I said, the North was done. And the early days of Reconstruction that had worked so well for the formerly enslaved, there were people in the Congress and state legislatures that were African American that were former slaves, but all that had gone away by this late a date of Reconstruction. And I don't think Tilden's election would have changed any of that. As a matter of fact, it may have accelerated how quickly Jim Crow took root in the South, and a little bit, in certain circumstances, in the North.
It could have gone worse.
Yeah.
I mean, as awful as that is, Tilden may have been worse.
It was still pretty bad, but it could have been worse.
Could have been worse, yeah. I wonder if you can say that for basically everything
Pretty much
in history.
everything.
Could have been
It
worse.
was pretty
It could've been
bad.
worse.
It
Yeah.
could have been worse.
No, that's a great topic, Joshua, and I feel like we did a program on Reconstruction. This was like 2020, so a couple of years
Did
ago.
we? Okay.
Or was
Yeah.
it 2021?
No, it was 2020.
I can't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
She was there. She
Yeah.
remembers.
But I think like going into that in even more detail would be a really cool program specifically about that compromise, so to speak.
I tell you what, I'm so glad you brought that up, Lib, because if any of you movie producers are out there, if you want to do a cool 10-episode HBO-style miniseries that addresses so many current issues with history, do a 10-part miniseries on Reconstruction.
Yeah.
The
yeah.
first episode is the surrender of the South, and the end of the last episode is the backroom bargain with Hayes becoming president. There's your 10-part miniseries. That is a phenomenal, heartbreaking story.
Yeah.
That would be a cool miniseries.
Because you could really follow Grant through most of
You
that.
could do Grant. You could do.
I'm just thinking characters. Which
you could do-
storylines?
Yeah.
You could do Frederick Douglass.
Yeah.
You could do. There's just. You
So
could
many
do
people.
the common African American soldier who fought in the Union and then goes back to the South and tries to make things work and everything falls apart. It would be such a cool story.
Well, if someone else doesn't do it, then maybe one day we can.
That's right.
Let's do it.
On top of the billion webcasts and everything.
Put down a note. Call Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. You hear me typing, right?
We'll just plan it. Here we go.
It could even be called Reconstruction.
Reconstruction. Love it. All right. So thank you so much, Josh. That was an excellent
Yes.
question. Our next question comes from Laura on YouTube. Oh, this is great. What invention do you think had the biggest effect on the world in the last couple of centuries? So if we're talking about maybe like since let's say the 1700s or 1800s. I feel like 1800s would be kind of interesting because that's like, industrial revolution is happening. So ponder
Are you
that.
talking about? Okay, let me ask a qualifying
Said
question.
on the world.
In the world,
On
are
the
you
world.
Are you asking for a specific thing that you can hold in your hands, or are you talking about an advancement in science or engineering?
How about we go with both? So let's talk
Okay.
big, broad. Like the first thing that comes to me is like electricity.
That's exactly where
Yeah.
that's exactly where I was going to go.
Yeah.
See, I was thinking more like things you could hold in your hand or
Yeah.
like physically use tools. So I was thinking the car.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because
The
that
automobile,
changes
yeah.
the way people travel. It changed the way people live. The suburbs developed because we have cars that you can then go into the city to work with.
Very true.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So the automobile allows people to travel obviously
Yeah.
greater
Right.
distances. Electricity
Like,
certainly.
electricity, I think, is the big one.
Now, okay, when it comes to electricity, I know Benjamin Franklin was like, hey, is lightning electricity? Key test. Yes. Okay, but after that,
They knew what electricity was, right?
Right.
That's what Franklin and his compatriots had figured out,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the beginning of learning how to control the flow of electricity.
okay, yeah.
But it was
yeah.
later when they began to say, you know what, we really can control this. We can hook up power generating generators and turbines from dams and hydroelectric power. We can power electric motors. We can create an electric light that can keep people up all hours of the time. And then, as further and further, everything our society now does and touches and depends on, it's electricity.
Which has also, sorry, I was down. Which has also introduced new problems because we're so dependent on it. If all the lights go off,
That's
no
right.
internet, no nothing.
That's the joke I always say, but it would be horrible. What are we going to do when the grid goes down? By the
Right.
grid, I mean the electrical grid. But
yeah,
you better hang out with the reenactors, people.
yeah, right.
It was interesting because that basically happened in Texas.
Right,
Last year
yeah.
with their
Oh,
winter
yeah, that's true.
snowstorm,
Yeah.
where basically their grid went down for a little bit, and it was interesting because I follow some historical reenactors from Texas on the social medias, and it was like they were just breaking out all of their reenacting stuff. and
Everyone
using
makes
it
fun
in
of
their
us until
home.
the power goes out.
Until the
And
past.
then we know what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Priscilla and I have talked. We will never own a home that doesn't have a fireplace or a wood stove.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Just because.
Makes
and
sense.
we're in the fairly temperate South,
Yeah.
Right.
too. All right. For specifics,
Yeah.
I'm going to cheat a little bit. And maybe not. The car is a big one.
Yeah. Definitely.
I'm going to go, since you set the time frame, Libba, with antibiotics.
Oh, right. I didn't think about medical advancements. That's huge.
Because
Yeah.
the effect that has had on our society, people used to die from getting a scratch on their hand from a rusty nail.
I had
or
an
things like
ancestor
that.
who died of a splinter.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
From a
Wow.
splinter, because there are no antibiotics. So having antibiotics
Yeah.
so readily available to make a cold just a cold and nothing to worry about.
Right.
And I'm not even talking about the vaccines and antivirals and stuff. I'm talking about just antibiotics.
Now,
like
when did
penicillin.
that come about? Yeah.
Penicillin is really the big, widespread, easy to create, easy to distribute, and that was World War II. Well, just before World War II,
Yeah.
I should say.
Okay.
It wasn't during World War II, but World War II was the first conflict in human history where more people died from battlefield wounds than from sickness and disease. And that was because of the creation of antibiotics 100%.
By this guy. I think. Wait, I just Googled that. So let's
Fleming,
see.
yes. That is Dr. Fleming, and he's the penicillin guy, right? began to, he sort of quasi-accidentally discovered mold, and that the mold had certain antibiotic qualities. And then he began to study that and realized that it could be very, comparatively, easily replicated
Right.
and produced en masse.
Got a lot of moldy bread.
Yeah. And I know, when I was younger, it was still literally penicillin, but now there have been advances with, zithromycin and amoxicillin,
Right.
but they're all derivatives of penicillin that was Alexander, I can't remember his first name, Alexander Fleming, I think. Dr. Alexander Fleming came up with penicillin.
Yes, you are correct.
Alexander,
Yes.
okay.
I would also venture to say the assembly line,
Oh, yeah.
which, I mean, that kind of goes with the car.
Right.
But
In a sense, yeah, but assembly
I was
line.
definitely like the assembly line because we use that in like all factories today, and
Yeah,
that's how we
right.
get the
Still.
goods that we need.
We're even able to get
Or
robots
want.
to do it instead of humans.
Yeah.
Now we are, yeah.
You know how they do it? Electricity.
Electricity, yeah, exactly.
To build electric cars.
Right.
And electric robots.
The
Those are-
electric robots will then drive our electric cars from one electric point to the other as
Yes.
they charge.
Until we figure out what is it? Is it like nuclear fusion that's the energy of tomorrow?
Yes, that's what we want.
That's what we want,
right?
yeah.
Well, but here's the thing. Nuclear fusion will be used to generate electricity.
Well, okay,
I mean,
right, yeah.
we know how to make electricity. We're just trying to find the easiest, cheapest way to produce electricity.
I gotcha, you're
We're
right.
not gonna come up. People are always wrong. Historians are great at looking backwards. Sometimes we're not great at looking forward. But electricity is how you're gonna run stuff.
Right, yeah.
Right. We just have to find a way to generate electricity.
Right. Excellent question, Laura. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on to Alma and Gabby. So Alma says, LoFi history snuck up on us this month, so I didn't get a full question from Gabby before she left for school. But she told me her musical this month was Mary Poppins, and to ask something about suffrage or nannies. So I'll come up with a question. How was the suffrage movement different in England compared to the United States? So this is definitely a Marie question
right.
for sure.
Yes, okay. So, suffrage movement really starts with the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848 in the United States. And then it's part of like a bunch of social movements within the United States, which included abolition and temperance and women's rights. So that was kind of like and child labor. That was also thrown in there as well.
Against, not for.
Yes, they were against child labor, just to make that clear. So that was one of those things that it was like a big meeting of like a lot of social issues that they were pushing for, one of which was women's rights. So that continues on. And then it kind of gets derailed with the whole Civil War situation. And at that point, they're really focusing on the abolition part of their like Declaration of the Rights of Women and whatnot. So they're really focusing on abolition for right before the Civil War, during the Civil War, and then after the Civil War, the women's movement in America kind of splits because you have Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and they think that women should be included within those Reconstruction amendments. Like, they should also get the right to vote if African American men are getting the right to vote. And they basically were not supportive of the 15th Amendment if it didn't include them. And then the other half of the movement said, hey, we should just be supportive of African American men getting the right to vote. We'll get the right to vote later. So that had a big split and basically derailed the entire suffrage movement for a while. And that's when it picks up in England. Because it gets derailed in America, but in England, that's when it kind of gets going, in the late 1800s. And they see the American model and kind of like what they're doing. And then you get some they've had some interesting tactics. So first off, it was basically nice little British ladies who would go and have tea with politicians and be like, hi, we're lovely. We would like the right to vote. Please give it to us. Thank you. And they went on and did that for like 20 or so years, and they made a little bit of progress that way, but not a lot, because the men were like, that's nice, dear. That's lovely. I'm so glad you want to be involved in politics. We're not going to give you the right to vote. So then you have some people like Emmeline Pickers Gill who decided to be a little bit more violent to get people's attention. Like throwing rocks through windows, chaining yourself to things in Parliament, putting bombs in post office boxes. Get people's attention.
You know, there is a word for using violence to enact or support a political agenda.
Is that called terrorism?
It sure is.
So,
By the officially accepted definition, I mean, so are the Sons of Liberty, for that matter.
I remember, Marie, you also said that they were treated fairly awfully at times in some circumstances.
So once they got arrested for blowing things up, then they would go on hunger strike in the prisons, and then they would get force-fed with like tubes shoved down their nose.
Wow.
It was not pretty.
Yikes.
It was not nice.
Oh wow, there's even I found an image of the time. Let me share this with y'all.
I was gonna say it. Oh yes.
Oh,
yeah. Let me zoom in a bit. Yep. So that's I don't know why it says liberal. Prisoners under a liberal government. Okay, so this is propaganda on the side of the women's movement to show how horrible they're being treated. I assume is that your take?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Wow.
Or, well...
Yeah, how do you take that?
I mean, I don't know. I don't have the right context.
Right,
it's the first time I've ever seen it. They may be saying, look, with the liberal government, we're going to make sure they stay alive because we care about them.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Wow.
People are weird.
Yeah.
They went through some pretty tough situations, though, and wanted to get their word across, it seems.
So the suffragettes, because it's suffragettes in England, they like that name kind of because it was like a derogatory term. It was like suffragettes, like majorettes, whatever. It was but then they kind of took it on their own in England, and they're like, I'm a suffragette. I'm gonna get the right to vote.
A little bit of a stretch, but all right.
Which is a bit of a stretch, but that's what they said, and then they
I'm gonna suffragette
that vote. And then they kind of took it as like their own, so they took that derogatory term and made it their own. In America, it was still a derogatory term. They didn't make it their own, so they preferred the term suffragist.
Yes.
Yeah. So in America, it was suffragists, in British, it was suffragettes.
And of course, what happens in 1920?
Then America gets the right to vote, which is really interesting. So in England, they don't get we have like the early 1900s, and that's when it picks up in America again. It's still going pretty good in England. You then have World War I. Everyone basically stops campaigning because there's a war on.
Right.
But then American women and also British women are like such patriotic and supporting of the war effort that the government's like, oh wow, look at that.
Yeah, you actually pulled your weight and did a lot of good stuff. So
we should give you the right to vote because you obviously love your country. Like you supported us through this terrible war. So then after the war ends in 1918, in 1920, American women get the right to vote.
Yeah.
And of course, they also had like a resurgence and kind of like a reunification of the women's suffrage movement also during World War I in America as well. So it got new leadership and gained new steam. In Britain, though, they got like, I think it was like in 1918, they got partial women's suffrage because you had to be like 32 and married and have so much money, or there was like some limitations about the women who could vote.
They had like a stepped approach to allowing women the vote.
Yes. So there was like one step that they got before us, but then America got like universal, like same rights as men for suffrage. And then after that, I think in 1925, Britain got suffrage on the same terms as men.
Very nice. So it seems like the major differences were in tactics, it sounds like.
Well, America got a little bit more violent.
Oh, what are some examples of...
Well, they changed them. They started picketing outside of the White House, and I think they might have handcuffed themselves to the fence.
They weren't putting bombs in
They were not putting bombs in things, though. But they took a little bit of the playbook.
I see. Yeah. So, I mean, like, here's one example of protest. I don't know where this is exactly, but it's
like New York.
Heavily against President Wilson.
Oh, yeah.
Wilson was against women's suffrage.
Yeah.
I just like to point that out. Another example of how Wilson is wrong about everything.
Is that going to be another program?
How Wilson is wrong about everything.
That's going to be my life's mantra.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
But then Wilson finally did give women the right to vote.
No, he didn't. Congress did.
Well, Congress did, but Wilson said he supported it.
Oh, he said a lot of things. Wilson said a lot of things.
We'll talk about that later.
Yes.
Oh, that was excellent question, Gabby and Alma.
Yeah.
And I love the topic of Mary Poppins because we do have a little taste of suffrage history in Mary Poppins.
Yes, I think it's so fun because even though the mom in the original Mary Poppins, she has like a suffrage like sash, and I was like, oh, that's so cute. I love that. But it's pink and blue, and I've been trying to find like if there was like why they decided on those colors, because the colors for British suffrage were purple and green and white.
I know why, I bet.
Why?
Technicolor.
Oh,
but
maybe
purple and green.
Technicolor.
I don't know.
That's a brighter color for Technicolor.
I've heard
The latest movie technology.
Yeah,
but sometimes I think people actually think that like the suffrage colors were like blue and pink because they saw it in the Mary Poppins movie. I'm just like, no.
I blame Wilson.
So this is the British one, right, Marie?
Yes, that's British.
Okay, cool.
In America, it was purple and gold.
Purple and gold.
Yes, purple, gold, and white. So
That's right.
they're very similar. They're basically like cousins, but they're different.
Oh yeah, here's so votes for women's sash. Oh cool, we can sort of see.
Also, it's about to be it's the month of Valentine's
That's
Day,
right.
and suffrage also was very much like kind of tied into Valentine's. Because I think there was a formation of one of the women's political organizations, which was founded on Valentine's Day.
That's right.
And then also they would send Valentines, like "Love me, love my vote," and basically they used it as a campaign day.
Oh, who was it? Which one of us found that suffrage board game from the period?
Oh.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
That sounds cool, but I don't remember.
I can't remember. Anyway, it was because it was basically
Yeah.
you had to move. Someone played. This is a British game.
Yeah.
They played the police, and then someone else played the suffragist, and they had to move at certain points to the board, and the police had to intercept. And basically, if you got like 2 or 3 suffragettes into the city hall, you won the game. But the police had to stop them from getting in there. It was, but it's from that time. It's like from the early 20s, I think. Very interesting.
I remember that because it was like basically like cops and robbers, but cops and suffragists.
That's really cool.
Cops and bomb-throwing suffragettes.
Yeah.
And here's one
Bomb
example.
throwing, Valentine sending suffragettes.
Yes, exactly. This you can see in this one. This must have been after the vote because it says February 14th. Women have the vote. My Valentine. If I can vote, why not propose? If I am bold, you must excuse me. I've loved you ages, goodness knows, and don't you dare, sir, to refuse me. Oh, that's great. That's great.
But
Love
the
it.
paper.
But the paper.
Let me read the paper first.
Yeah, that's right.
This is what I got to do.
Yes.
It's like that 1950 stereotypical where the dad has his armchair and then there's like that one light bulb behind him as he reads his paper.
Yes.
That's just like in every form of media for like the past 20 years.
Well, thank you so much to Alma and Gabby for those questions. That was awesome. Our next question comes from Karen. Speaking of sunglasses. Oh, and so her question is about the history of sunglasses. And this might be something we need to Google together. I don't know how much y'all know about the history of sunglasses.
A little bit.
Yeah,
tiny bit.
they've been around a while.
Yes.
Early on, like it's so funny, some reenactors try to get them and wear them for like earlier periods, like around the American Revolution, the colonial period, or the War of 1812. But what they were actually for at that point, they thought that they were a treatment for syphilis.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, why? What's the symptom that...
Light getting in, the light
interesting.
could accelerate the
and...
rage of syphilis on your body. So if you could use like blue tinted lenses specifically. So when they think they're being cool wearing sunglasses in early American history, what they really are saying, I have syphilis.
Ah, I see.
But they don't know it.
Yeah. I also think sometimes people affected by blindness might wear them.
Yes.
That was also, but not like, if you were a regular person who was not afflicted by syphilis or blindness, you didn't really use them.
Right. They did not enter into like pop culture, until about the 20s or 30s. At
That's
least
what
I don't
was
know about around the
thinking.
world, like, but in America,
it was very much.
yeah. Now, Libba, you've got some great pictures of not sunglasses like we think of them, but actual.
Right. This is pretty cool. I didn't know there was a sunglass museum, but there is. And on their page, they actually demonstrate how the Hitomi tribe of Inuits, not necessarily sunglasses, but as we know them, but they have these slits so that there's less sun coming into their eyes.
And the glare, because think about it, they're in a landscape that is always white all the time, and that is blinding. And so this kind of helps deal with that glare off of the snow.
It also says, legend has it that the Emperor Nero watched gladiator fights wearing emerald lenses. But many historians cite this claim as iffy, but that's so there's probably, I would imagine that, humans are pretty creative creatures, so we probably figured something out early on, but now I'm curious about
point,
1920s.
everyone would just wear a hat.
Right, that makes sense.
Sunglasses came into fashion when hats went out.
Ah, there you go. Whoa.
Yeah, because hats, like you say, hats, this is how you shade your eyes with hats.
Oh, very cool, very cool. That's a great question, Karen. Thanks for asking. All right, so
apparently they went out of style right before this episode.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, we forgot to tell you.
You forgot that.
Now, we also had some cool comments based on what we've talked about, and Karen mentioned that there's a PBS documentary called Reconstruction, America After the Civil War, and that was in 2019.
I've seen part of that one.
So that might be a cool one to check out.
But I want a miniseries.
Yeah.
The History Channel also did a good one on Grant, and which covered Reconstruction, because that was Grant's presidency.
And Phil, hey Phil, good to see you. Phil also mentions, when we were talking about advances in technology, there's a BBC series called Connections that covers the history of the main technological developments over the centuries. So if you're interested in learning more about that, check out the BBC series Connections. Thank you, Phil. That's awesome. All right, and let's see, I'm also, hi Sam on Facebook, Good to see you. Oh, I see we've got another question, that is excellent. I've got some questions in the queue, so I think now that it's 5:08, I wanna make sure we get through these questions, so maybe this can be kind of a quick fire round in a way. So, our next question comes from Richard, who is one of our fantastic living history interpreters who portrays Benedict Arnold. Awesome. So Richard asks, since there were only 5 years in between, how was World War II equipment different from equipment in the Korean War?
So at first it wasn't at all.
Oh, okay, wow.
Period, it wasn't at all. And there were not major changes. They're still using the same M1 rifle. They're still using, Sherman tanks. What they realized, though, is that the Soviet tanks that the North Koreans have are World War II era T-34 tanks. Turns out they're really good, and the American bazooka could not penetrate the armor. So one of the fast things that America did was to create a larger bazooka from basically 2.5 inches to about 4 inches in diameter for a big rocket, right?
Now,
so that was
I'd love to find one of these. Is there a specific name? Like, is the M20 Super Bazooka?
That's a super. They called it the super because the smaller ones in World War II is what all the GIs were used to. Then they came up with the Super Bazooka, right, which was bigger, could penetrate the armor.
Wow.
Given the cold climate of the Korean Peninsula, they also developed new cold winter clothing. That's in terms of just the regular life of the soldier, that's the biggest change that they made during the length of the Korean War, is they came up with a lot of new cold weather sleeping bags, trousers, insulations, big parkas, things like that. Probably the most significant big scale technological change is that by Korea, they're also using jet-powered fighter aircraft, which was only there at the very end of World War II. But jet aircraft become the norm for, there's still a lot of turboprop-driven aircraft in the Korean conflict, but MiGs, F-86 and F-100 Sabre jets, things like that, those are flying over the skies of Korea. But by and large, the tactics, the main basic weapons, the uniforms, the helmets, all that type of equipment, it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing as World War II.
I looked up a few.
No, that's the picture.
Oh, this is it?
This
is it? Okay,
that's
so
a good one.
This is the super bazooka.
Yeah, so the guy on the right has the standard old World War II version, which is like, I forget, like 2.34 inches in diameter or something. And then on the left is the new super bazooka, which is 3.5 inches. And you can see they're both holding a projectile for the respective bazooka, and you can see how much bigger, therefore how much, what greater range and what greater explosive power that one on the left has.
Wow.
Compared to
looks like
the
a
other
bowling pin.
They're big.
And now I also looked up winter uniforms. Is this what you're talking about? This is Korea.
Those are I think those are early on. Those are almost makeshift uniforms. You see they've got on the coats that are about the same as the one I have on now.
Yeah.
What they really have is they have like M51 parkas that have 2 or 3 different layers of insulation that can button on the inside of them. But that gives you an idea of how much equipment they're having to carry around to build these outposts in Korea. Korea is a really interesting conflict. Actually, remember, it wasn't a war.
Right.
Because we never declared war. It was a police action.
Now, what about, is this the Super Saber you were talking about? I was trying to find.
There's an F-86 Sabre is the most common jet aircraft.
F-86 Sabre. All right, let's see if we can find it. This one?
Yes.
Ooh,
yes.
That's cool.
They're cool. They're cool looking planes. The air intake is there right on the front of the nose.
Oh.
So it sucks the air in through the nose, and then the jet comes out. The jet propulsion comes out the backs way faster than any turboprop plane.
Wow.
Or propeller-driven plane. And then
cool.
towards the very end of the war, get F-100s, which are even faster, because the Soviets had MiG-15s. Excuse me, the Chinese / North Koreans / Soviets.
Because they were all working together?
Okay. Yes, they were. It's.
All right, I'm going to write down the Korean
The Korean
conflict.
War. Yeah, the Korean War is a good one to go into.
Nice.
And as I always begin when I teach the Korean War, MASH is a great TV show. Put everything from it out of your head.
Yeah.
It's totally different.
All fictional. Yeah.
Well, half the time people think MASH is set during Vietnam.
Right.
So. Well, that's the thing. It was written to reflect the Vietnam War. That's why the television show lasted 3 times as long as the actual Korean War.
So I'm going to go to Sam's question, and then we'll go to Josh's 2 questions to conclude, unless anybody has any last minute. Oh, I see Wendy. Good. Wendy has another question. So we'll get as many as we can. And Josh, we know you're going to be here next time, so we can always catch up on your questions.
That's right. Write it down and use it again.
Yeah. Don't worry. I've got you covered. So Sam's question is... So members of the De Luna expedition's description of the Kusa town they were at in 1560 sounds like the site of the current town of Ellijay. Is there evidence of any Spanish expedition visiting Ellijay? Now, I don't know anything about the De Luna expedition. Do you want to give us a little bit of context?
I don't know that much about the De Luna either. And I don't know... I'm from Blue Ridge, which is Fannin County, which is right down the road from Ellijay in Gilmer County. To my knowledge, which is not substantial on this factor, I don't think there is evidence of Spanish travel or expeditions that go through what is now Gilmer County and Ellijay. We do know that Native Americans have been living in the area around Ellijay for a very long time, right? Just because of its topography and geographic location and the river there, like going all the way back to the Mississippian era. They didn't build any mounds in Ellijay, but there's evidence of people living in that area. I mean, Ellijay, it's a Native American based name. Mm-hmm. But as far as the Spanish evidence, I don't know. We're not even sure where DeSoto came through, and that was a much larger expedition.
It seems like he was in Georgia, but exactly where in Georgia?
Yeah.
Right. It's difficult to know. We only know that DeSoto especially came through because 80% of the population died of European diseases within the next 10 years. But yeah, that's a good question. We should write down doing a little more research on that and get back to you.
Yeah. I wrote down.
Do you know anything?
No,
about it at all?
I know about DeSoto a bit, but I never even know.
I hadn't even heard
I've
of
heard the name DeLuna, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, to know a little bit just from, let's Google that together.
Sure.
So we do have the DeLuna expedition, which is Tristan de Luna was the explorer. I'll share the page that I've got here so we can just learn a little bit together, but appears that was a conquistador. And let's see, creating a Spanish settlement on the Gulf Coast to create an overland route to what is today South Carolina. Now, I mean, maybe we could give a little context to Spanish exploration in the so-called New World. I mean, when were the earliest Spanish fleets coming over here?
Pretty early. Georgia history, we tend to think of it as starting in 1733 when Oglethorpe comes over, and that begins the British colony of Georgia. But the Spanish had been in this area for 2 centuries before that, for a good 200 years.
Yeah.
Because when you think like oldest cities in America, or oldest, I guess, colonized cities in America, generally, I think it's Pensacola, Florida, which is right there in the Panhandle, which I mean, it's very close to Georgia and Alabama, and then also St. Augustine, Florida.
Yeah.
Right.
They have a rivalry as to who's actually the oldest because it depends on if the town that got washed away by the hurricane but then rebuilt
Right.
counts. They have like a rivalry about who's the oldest, but like they go back at least 300 years.
Wow.
Right. And so, yeah, around the Gulf Coast, down into Central and South America. So the Spanish have been here. The Spanish go in, ironically, when Fannin County, I'm getting all mixed up,
Yeah.
sorry. When the Spanish first come to what is now Georgia, the European power they butt up against is France.
Okay.
Right? The French are, because they're coming down and doing Mississippi River sort of things and working east from there and along the Gulf Coast, Fort Caroline, that is definitely not a Spanish name, that's a French name. And coming into this area, the French and the Spanish start warring back and forth and get involved with the Native Americans early on. And Britain is really very much a latecomer. And it really only works because the Spanish had sort of pulled out of these areas. I think that the Spanish term for what's now Georgia, more or less, is Guale.
Guale. That's cool.
Mostly a lot of missions, Jesuits coming to convert the native populations to Christianity, Catholic Christianity.
Catholicism.
Yes, but
I think you're bumping the table there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just hear a
Tongue,
deep
tongue.
rumbling.
So, yeah, the Spanish have been a part of Georgia history for almost as long as the British have been a part of Georgia history.
I don't think we've done a program on that specifically either. We did a cool program about the Spanish in the American Revolution, but this is not this is
Georgia
much different.
Yeah, Georgia. Well, what is now Georgia
Right.
specific? We should.
Yeah.
That's our 5th live stream topic today.
I know. I keep writing them down. Maybe that's a benefit of LoFi history.
The quote unquote colony of Georgia expanded from like the East Coast to as far as it would go. Like it went across Alabama and Mississippi and over there.
Yeah, the charter the king gave the trustees went all theoretically to whatever was over there to the Pacific Ocean.
Definitely where the Spanish and French were very much involved over there in those areas as well.
Yeah. Great question. We will look into that and possibly do a program on the early Spanish explorers in the Southeast. That would be excellent. So our next question comes from Wendy. Wendy asks, what if, Wendy has a what if, we gotta get our Wendy what if, woo! So what if the Gallipoli campaign has succeeded? I have no idea what that is.
I do.
All right, take it away, Glenn. What is the Gallipoli?
In the Great War,
World War I.
World War I, when the war began, of course, the Germans are fighting the Russians on their eastern front. On their western front, they're fighting the Belgians and the French and the British over there. The trench system has developed. They're, as Churchill said, they're down in Flanders chewing barbed wire. And there didn't seem to be any way to break that deadlock on the Western Front with all the trenches and everything. So people have called this the only true strategic vision of the First World War. And Winston Churchill, as First Lord of the Admiralty, led this campaign. He said, what if we went all the way around Germany and Austria-Hungary and went up through the Dardanelles, which the Greeks called the Hellespont, towards Istanbul, and sent a fleet and an army that way, and basically got into the Central Powers through the back door. And they're like, okay, well, we're spending a lot of resources all over the world, so what do you need for this? And Churchill's like, it needs to be mostly a naval effort, because the British had the most powerful navy in the world. This is part of the reason the Great War started. But the German Navy wouldn't come out and fight them, so this amazing fighting force was sitting in docks for about a year trying to find a way to get involved in the war and to justify the vast expenditures that had been going on for decades. This was Churchill's way of not only doing that, but having a strategic way around and into the Black Sea. And yes, what happened was the Navy tried to force its way through the Dardanelles, through the narrow part there. They didn't quite do it because the admiral on the scene got afraid of mines and lost too many ships and basically broke down. It was like, well, I have an idea. What if we send an army, and we'll use Australians and Anzac troops, up around the other side at the Gallipoli Peninsula, take out those guns, and then the Navy can make its way through. And it basically just bogged down, right? They could not force the Straits and the Dardanelles. Historians argue, but I am on the camp that thinks that if the admiral had pushed a little bit harder, it would have worked. And that's the thing. This hounded Churchill for the rest of his career. Whenever anyone was trying to get him, they would throw up the Gallipoli campaign and talk about how it was a fantastic failure, and the Anzac troops lost everything, and the Turks fought them like crazy and won the battle. And they ended up having to withdraw the entire naval and army forces from the peninsula and from the campaign. To your question, if it had worked, would it have made a difference? I, in my opinion, will give a resounding yes. It could have thrown Turkey out of the war. Well, Turkey / the Ottoman Empire, depending on what you call it that time. Pulled them out of the war. It would have opened up another supply route to Russia to get supplies from the rest of the Triple Entente. And having the Ottomans leave the war means that Russia would have been able to sweep down into the frontiers in that direction and, in effect, totally surround Austro-Hungary, unite with Serbia, get into the Balkans, force them to surrender, or force Germany to surrender. It could have made all the difference in that war. But because it did fail, the war went on. And because of its failure, no one in the Triple Entente's high command was willing to take another risk with that kind of strategic reach. And so it just continued in trench warfare on the Western Front until November 1918. But yeah, that's a fascinating, I think, awesome question. There's lots of good books on that. Gallipoli could have made all the difference. They were that close. It really is one of history's great what ifs.
Yeah, okay, I've written that one down too. All right, so we have just enough time, I think, to get to Josh's questions. Let's see. Okay, so Josh asks, what if Lincoln survived? Would Reconstruction actually do its purpose successfully? Would Lincoln be remembered in a worse light than he was? So do we know about Lincoln's goals for after the Civil War?
A little bit, yeah. There was congressional Reconstruction and presidential Reconstruction that were two different views on things, and you may have opinions on how this could have gone with Lincoln's Lincoln wasn't going to be as lenient as people after his death said he was going to be.
Yeah.
But he did want to reunite and heal the country.
He was not after squashing the South for revenge the way a lot of the radical Republicans in
He
Congress
didn't want
were.
vengeance. And since he was a Republican with his party, he looked like he was lenient and you compare it to them.
I see. Yeah.
But
yeah.
he wasn't going to just like roll over and be like, you can have whatever you want, South.
Right.
We're just happy you're back.
I mean, for example, he said that 10%, one of the conditions to bring each state back in was that 10% of the population of that state had to swear allegiance to the Union.
Mm-hmm.
The radical Republicans thought that was way too lenient, and they said 75% of all people in the state must swear allegiance before it can be brought back in. And no one who served in an official Confederate capacity could vote or hold office.
For how? Forever?
Forever.
Wow.
And there was
you're a
how it
traitor.
actually-
that's not how it
No, it
turned
didn't.
out.
No,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you ended up with like the vice president of the Confederacy becoming governor of Georgia
Right.
after that. So no, that's not how
Yeah.
it actually went down.
Right.
Wow.
But was an idea.
There's also an interesting theory of people who have studied Lincoln himself
Yeah.
and looked at pictures of him later in the war, and I can't remember what disease it is, but have said he probably had this degenerative disease and like a degenerative nervous disease based on what we're seeing in these photographs. And if he hadn't been assassinated, he probably would not have survived his second term anyway.
That's
Right.
interesting. I had never heard of that.
I've
And
not heard that theory. There are a
it's-
lot of theories about
there's
Lincoln,
a lot of
though.
theories. And I will also say this. He may have succeeded in doing a better job of maintaining Reconstruction's momentum towards a more egalitarian, freedom-based society in the South. But politics at that time were incredibly strange and virulent. And it is a historical fact that in our nation's history, not a single president has come out of their second term as highly loved and favored and popular as they went into it.
Right.
Not a one. Not even George Washington.
Yeah.
By the end of his second term, there were a couple of places that were burning effigies of Washington at the end of his
Wow.
second term.
I
So
didn't realize that. Wow.
I don't think Lincoln would have escaped that either.
Now, why?
He could, but also part of the reason the Civil War happened was because Lincoln got elected.
Right,
So
right.
I think it's a little hard to say that it would be worse in his second term.
Right, yeah.
When half the country seceded because you ended up in office.
Yeah, I
But-
mean, he had a different presidential experience. Pretty unique
It's
one.
a very
He
unique
did.
presidential
He did.
experience.
But I don't think he would have come out with the support in the North that
See,
he
I
had
feel
at
like
the
you
end
could
of his
have
second
that
term.
argument.
I mean,
Yeah.
take the South out of the equation. They hate
Yeah.
him no matter what.
Yeah.
That is just a done deal. But in the North, he did get elected fairly overwhelmingly in November of '64 for his
Yeah.
second term.
Yeah.
But if he had gone and completed all 4 years of that term, there would have been an issue.
There's
People
also-
would have not liked him.
There's also a historical fact that nothing helps your cause like a martyr.
Right, yeah.
So he kind of became a martyr
Right,
for
yeah.
the cause of Reconstruction in that way, which nothing helps your cause like a martyr.
Yeah,
Right.
kind of a romanticized
Even if the martyr
version of him.
would never
yeah.
have agreed with the things he
Nope.
Right.
put in his name or her
Yeah,
name to.
yeah.
But it kind of like people like have that like sympathy
That's right.
overwhelmingness.
It's what Lincoln would have wanted, so vote for
so
it.
we should have done. We should do this. And also, it was the first president to ever be assassinated.
Right, yeah.
Not the first president to ever die in office, but the first
Right.
person to actually
Right.
be assassinated.
pretty big
So that also had a very dramatic effect on the country of like, oh my gosh, like this can happen.
Right, yeah. Well, excellent
Watch out,
question.
McKinley.
Yeah.
You're next.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think Garfield.
I
was
know. It's just
Oh, okay.
McKinley's funnier to say.
Ah,
I don't know. Garfield's pretty funny.
Garfield's pretty
okay.
good, but he has
Garfield's
that.
like a cat.
Yeah, see, he has that whole cat baggage thing.
Well, folks,
We've degenerated into frivolity and stupidity. So.
yes. Well, it is 5:30. Thank you so much for joining us. I do want to give you a heads up on upcoming programs that we have. So, for instance, our members only mini doc this Friday, really fascinating. This is about a woman named Mother Matilda Beasley, who was Georgia's first black nun. Marie's presentation on this is fascinating. She led a secret school for black children in Savannah, and she did so much for not only black women in Savannah, but in Georgia and the Southeast in general. She really became the woman known for her charity, known for how much she gave back to her community, and her advocacy for the enfranchisement of black children. So, we're going to have this. This is this Friday. It's not too late to become a member and enjoy this program and all of our members' mini docs. And we also have coming up, Glenn is going to be presenting. This is a free public mini doc. And this is Guiding His Flock, Martin Luther King Jr. as Pastor. So this is going to focus on how did Martin Luther King Jr.'s religious beliefs influence his activism, some of which may surprise you as far as his more progressive beliefs outside of those that he grew up with. So it's really fascinating. We have excellent programs coming up. And of course, if you want to become a member, you can do that on our website. It's only $5 a month or $45 a year to become a digital member, and I will leave information on that as we leave you now. So thank you so much for joining us for Lo-Fi History. We'll be back next month, but we hope to see you in the chat sooner than that.
Absolutely.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye guys.